Long before Boeing's 737 MAX crash, Ethiopian air pilot warned of dangers. Bloomberg: an Ethiopian Airlines pilot told senior managers at the carrier months before one of its Boeing Co. 737 MAX jets crashed that more training and better communication to crew members was needed to avert a repeat of a similar disaster involving a Lion Air flight. According to emails and documents reviewed by Bloomberg News, the pilot in December urged his superiors to bolster training on a 737 MAX flight control feature so crews would be better prepared for what the Lion Air pilots encountered in October before plunging into the Java Sea, killing all aboard. It will be a crash for sure, if pilots struggling with a malfunction of Boeing's flight control system on the 737 MAX also encountered, for example, a cockpit warning that they were flying too close to the ground, the pilot, Bernd K. von Hoesslin, wrote in a December 13 email. On March 10, an Ethiopian Airlines plane operated by two other pilots crashed minutes after takeoff from Addis Ababa, killing 157. While the crash played out differently from how von Hoesslin described, he accurately foresaw the chaos and peril of multiple cockpit warnings that pilots dealt with during the March crash. Von Hoeslin's in 418 pages of previously unreported correspondence and documents he sent to airline managers, von Hoesslin cited a number of concerns he said needed to be addressed relating to maintenance, pilot rest, and operational procedures. His concerns von Hoesslin declined to comment for this story. The documents seen, Ethiopian Airlines spokesman Biniam Dempsey said by phone, "I can't comment on anything right now." The airline has said, "It's unclear whether von Hoeslin's suggestions for training would have made a difference," said Jeffrey Gazzetti, the former director of the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration's Accident Investigation Division, noting that crash investigators, regulators, and airlines are still evaluating the extent of additional training needed. "I bet there were numerous other similar discussions within other 737 MAX airlines following the Lion Air accident, and I bet considerations were made in some fashion with most of those airlines," he said. Von Hoeslin's bosses at Ethiopian Airlines, as well as the nation's transport minister, have cast suspicion on a malfunction of the 737 MAX feature known as the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. The Chicago-based in both pilots unsuccessfully battled automatic nose-down movements commanded by MCAS. The movements were tripped. In the December email, von Hoesslin reminded managers that flight crews could be overwhelmed by multiple warnings and cockpit alerts that can sound during an errant activation of MCAS. Problems with the system. Von Hoesslin, who identified himself in the documents as a certified 737 instructor, submitted his resignation to Ethiopian Airlines in April. The documents read, in his email to several bosses, including those responsible for flight operations and safety, von Hoesslin called attention to the airline's flight simulator program. The simulators were, although regulators and airlines around the world did not require that pilots train on a MAX simulator after the Lion Air crash, Hoesslin took issue with the airline's approach. The sim program does not simulate the MCAS, thus using this older NG has serious drawbacks in our training when operating the MAX, von Hoesslin wrote in an email. "I suggest all." In a separate email in November, von Hoesslin asked airline managers to provide more detail about MCAS to those MAX pilots who are not fully or even aware of how the MAX MCAS system functions. The request came in response to von Hoesslin. The manager circulated more details about MCAS that the manager said came from Boeing and that explained the automated flight control feature in greater detail. Earlier this month, Ethiopian Airlines said it is among the very few airlines in the world that operates a full flight simulator for the Boeing 737 MAX 8 but that it wasn't configured to simulate MCAS. On May 17, 2 days after a U.S. House hearing in which Missouri Republican Sam Graves cited pilot error as a factor in the fatal crash. Ethiopian Airlines said in a statement that any effort to divert public attention from the flight control system problem of the airplane is a futile exercise because it is not based on factually correct analysis. While U.S. aviation regulators and Boeing issued warnings in November that included instructions on how pilots should respond to MCAS's activation, there was no call for simulator training. In an April 4 statement, Ethiopian Airlines said the preliminary report into the March 10 crash clearly showed that the pilots followed correct procedure. However, that report shows the pilots left the thrust too high and turned the motor driving MCAS back on after initially switching it off. In his resignation letter, von Hoesland said he felt the airline hadn't fully responded to his complaints. Some of these concerns were safety-related and well within the duty of the airline to adequately address, he wrote. With assistance from Alan Levin. To contact the reporters on this story, Ryan Bean in Washington at Bloomberg.net. Nizar Manikin to contact the editors responsible for this story, John Morgan at jmorgan97 at Bloomberg.net, Flynn McRoberts. For more articles like this, please visit us at Copyright 2019 Bloomberg LP.
Raindrop, drop top, top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.